I guess my first question to you, let's just get into your background a bit. I want to ask you just in terms of a runner, how long were you running? And then the second question to that will be is, when did you find inspiration to start a group like this?
Okay. Um, I actually started running distances in high school. I ran cross country, and I don't know if you remember the Michael Jackson video "Bad."
Yes, I
At the
do.
very beginning of it, where it starts at a white private high school in the suburbs, and he's taking the train going to the inner city. That was my experience for 4 years in high school, except I couldn't dance like Michael or sing like Michael. But I like to call it, I was part of the great socioeconomic experiment to see whether or not Black inner city youth can make it at a white suburban prep school. It was during that time that it was mandatory that you participate in a sport 2 out of the 3 seasons. And I decided to try cross country in the fall. The challenge I had was there was a country club near the school, and the white students could, of course, go and run on the golf course. However, if I did it, since there probably weren't any Black members, I would stand out. And so between that and the fact that I couldn't run in my neighborhood because it was just too dangerous, I gave up distance running while I was in high school. In college, I read a book by Dr. Kenneth Cooper called Aerobics and another one called New Aerobics, where he stated that diabetics who are dependent on insulin could either decrease their insulin intake or go completely off of it if they maintain a healthy lifestyle. So I had been diagnosed as a pre-diabetic at 8 years old. And the doctor said I would go on insulin by the time I was a teenager. But as a result, we believe, of participating in sports in high school, I ended up losing weight and not having to go on insulin. But after reading Dr. Kenneth Cooper's book, I realized that I can continue that healthy lifestyle by setting a lifetime goal. And for me, that goal was to average running, walking, or crawling 3 miles a day. So I set that goal in 1976, and in 1979, I started keeping a running journal. And as of the end of last year, I had averaged 3 miles a day, had run a total of over 45,000 miles. And at 64, I'm still not on insulin. So the reason I took up running also is because it was very efficient. It was a very efficient sport. I could burn more calories in a shorter period of time running than I could bicycling or swimming. And I didn't need a lot of equipment. I didn't need a partner. So like if I wanted to play tennis in order to stay fit, I didn't need a swimming pool, and I could do it at any time of day or night. So that's the reason that I was running back then, and I'm still running today. It's a sport of
Absolutely.
efficiency.
And I think that's one of the greatest assets of running, right? Like, other than like, you should have the proper gear, like the proper running shoes and the proper t-shirt if you're going to run in that. But it's a free activity. I think what I enjoy and what many people enjoy the most about running is, you don't need a rec center to do it, right? You don't need equipment other than your feet. And even if you start off at a small pace, again, with just a light little jog or even maybe a walk, and you build up to it, it's something that's not only a vital but essential to your health. So I definitely agree with that, and it's something I can relate to. So now we get to we know your background, and now we get to a point where we're in 2004, and I know I started running. I want to say I did track. See, I didn't do long distance running. I did track in high school, and it was fun. I just did it as a sport, and it's two total different types of running. But when I started running in New York City, and especially in the Bronx, and I grew up in the Bronx, there just weren't a lot of people running, and a lot of people like ourselves, a lot of Black people running at that time. And I want to date that back I want to say back in about 2009 to 2010, when, you know, I would see Black runners, but I'd had to go into the city, go into Manhattan and see that. So, you know, I was excited as the years went on when I started seeing forums and groups where, or even people out in these races that looked like me. So going back further than that, in 2004, what was your motivation before starting the National Black Marathon Association, and how did you go about that?
Well, I ran my first marathon in 1982.
Oh.
And I remember being in the starting line area, and there were about 4 or 5 Black runners out of 400 or 500 runners there in the starting line area. And I didn't know any of them. The white guys around me started a conversation about the fact that they thought I was too big to run a marathon. Now, these guys didn't know anything at all about me, but they're striking up this conversation. And I'm thinking to myself, these guys don't know anything about me. They have no idea the training that I put in, all the different books that I read, but they want to pass judgment on me as to whether or not I would even make it, you know, to the finish line. And bear in mind, in 1982, the prevailing wisdom was if you couldn't run it in under 4 hours, don't even attempt it. And what the white guys didn't know was that I had I had a running role model, and that was Dick Gregory. In his book, his autobiography, Nigger, he talked about the mental aspects of being a distance runner. And bear in mind, he was an NCAA All-American in distance running. And in 1976, he ran from LA to New York and averaged over 40 miles a day. I had also read a book called The Spook Who Sat by the Door. And in that book, there was a character who was identified as being a Black long distance runner. And in that book, he talked about how this guy would go on these runs. He was a very logical person. He would solve problems and think through a lot of issues while he was running. So between Dick Gregory and the character in this book, I appreciated the mental aspects of distance running. And I also knew, based off of my training, that I could indeed run this marathon. And I ended up finishing it in 3 hours, 59 minutes, and 53 seconds. So first marathon, I finished in under 4 hours. Over the years, I continued to run marathons. In fact, my goal was to run the Dallas Marathon in December every year and the Fort Worth Cowtown Marathon in February. Training for those 2 marathons meant that I was going to be in the best shape of my life during the most high calorie season, so to speak, of the year. So you're looking at staying in shape from Thanksgiving all the way through Valentine's Day. So you throw Christmas in there, and that's when a lot of people gain weight. But that's when I was in the best shape as a result of preparing for those 2 marathons. So I had been doing that for a number of years and never gave any thought to it. In 2001, I was a speaker at the Black Data Processing Association's conference in Chicago. And I just so happened to mention that I had a goal of running 50 marathons before I turned 50. And I had completed 47 marathons at that time. So Charlotte Simmons was in the audience at that time, and she was affiliated with the South Fulton Running Partners group in Atlanta, which was an all-Black running club. In fact, they were the nation's oldest all-Black running club. And after I finished speaking, she pulled me aside along with some other marathoners who happened to be there, and they said, "We've never, ever met a marathoner, a Black marathoner who has run as many marathons as you have." And until that point, I'd never given it much thought because I was just kind of doing it out there by myself. So they said, "Well, let us know when you get ready to run your 50th and, we'll see about, joining you." So over the years, Charlotte and I stayed in contact with each other. And I said, hey, this is going to be my 50th marathon. And at this marathon, there were 6 Black runners who had shown up, and this marathon typically only had about maybe 75 runners, and I was usually the only Black. And all of us ended up winning age group or weight division trophies. And after the race, we were talking about how, it'd be great, if we can get together, maybe once a year, someplace around the country and just all kind of congregate and run a marathon or half marathon. A couple of years later, I was running the marathon in my hometown of St. Louis. And unbeknownst to me, the course went by the public housing or the projects that I used to live in. So as I'm running by there are these Black kids that are sitting on the curb. And they decided to kind of join me. So I'm running along with them and talking with them. And I began to realize at that point that just being there, I was motivating them. And I was kind of sharing, my dreams and aspirations with them, thinking, that, I'm influencing these kids just by physically being there and by them seeing me run this race. So I reached out to Charlotte in 2004 and we said, okay, let's go ahead and start this organization. And so we started it officially, I believe, in November of 2004 as a nonprofit organization with the goal of pulling together as many Black distance runners as we could from around the country at a different location every year, and also to offer college scholarships to deserving high school distance runners. So in 2012, I remember I received an email from one of the senior editors at Runner's World. And he says, hey, I'm trying to find this particular lady, and I figured she would be a part of your organization. So her name was Marilyn Bevins. And I checked their database. She wasn't a member. Of course, went on the internet, searched on her name, found out she had placed second in the 1977 Boston Marathon. And the first thing I thought about was, why are they reaching out to the Black Marathoners Association about this white lady? So I keep digging and I found this video interview of her out on YouTube. And I was shocked to find out she was African American, born and raised in Baltimore, placed second at the 1977 Boston Marathon. And bear in mind, by this time, I had been running for close to 30 or 40 years, and I'd never heard of this lady. So I reached out to her and was talking to her. And then I got with the board of directors from the Black Marathoners Association, was sharing all this information with them. And we started talking about the lack of Black role models in distance running. Over the years of running, I had talked with other Blacks, and we said, hey, have you heard about this person over in LA, this person in San Francisco, this other person in New York? And we realized that the Black distance runners weren't being recognized by the Black running community because we didn't know who they were, but also by the white running community who actually knew who they were. So with that, we decided we were going to start the National Black Distance Runners Hall of Fame and Achievement Awards Banquet. And at the Achievement Awards Banquet, we would recognize our members for accomplishing different goals, such as finishing marathons or half marathons on all 7 continents, all 50 states. We added the Abbott World Majors, or individuals who had completed 100 marathons or 100 half marathons. We wanted to recognize them for those accomplishments. So in 2013, we had the first National Black Distance Running Hall of Fame and inducted the late Ted Corbett, as well as Marilyn Bevins. Those were the first 2 people that were inducted. And the interesting thing about this is, prior to that time, despite all of the things that Ted Corbett did with the New York Roadrunners Club, because he was one of the founding members, he was the president of the organization for a period of time, he was one of the individuals who helped start the New York City Marathon. And of course, he's the one who came up with the method for accurately measuring running courses. He had not been inducted into the New York Roadrunners Club Hall of Fame, despite all of the great things he did with the organization, until we announced our Hall of Fame and stated we were going to induct him. And after that is when the New York Roadrunners Club decided, oh, we need to induct Ted Corbett into our Hall of Fame. So we'd like to think that we kind of nudged them in the right direction and got them to start recognizing the accomplishments of African American distance runners. So now we have the Hall of Fame every 2 years. And I forgot, one of the reasons why we call ourselves the Black Marathoners Association instead of the National Black Runners Association is that Charlotte and I wanted the running community to take us seriously, to take our organization seriously. And we knew if we put the name marathoner out there, one of the first things that they would do is go check our credentials to see whether or not, we really are runners. And by the time we started the organization, I believe collectively we had run about 70 marathons. So we ended up having a lot of credibility within the running community. And we have always been open to all runners, whether you are a 5K runner, marathoner, ultra marathoner. We've always been open to all runners and welcome all runners into the organization. So you don't have to run a marathon to be a part of it. In fact, 60% of our members have never run a marathon and never plan to run a marathon. And like I said, when we give out achievement awards, we also give them out for half marathons.
Well, it's great. I'm so glad that you gave me some insight on that. And thank you. It's insight that even as a member of your Facebook group, I didn't know. As a New Yorker, I did know about Ted Corbett and his involvement in NYRR. But one of the things that I love about this podcast is I'm a student and I continue to learn not only from professionals like yourself, but I just learn the backstory of it, right? So when National Black Marathoners Association decided to work with Ted Corbett and induct, and us as Black people, we decided, okay, we're going to induct one of our own. It almost, like you said, I feel like it kind of not only nudged, but forced the hand of NYRR to do that. So, it's telling and it's actually remarkable. And I think it speaks to why, a group like this is important, right? It gives you something to aspire to, but not only that, if you are working hard within the community, and I don't want to just restrict it to the Black community just for runners, because using Ted Corbett as an example, he served all runners. But it provides a space to acknowledge that, right?
Yes.
What I'd like to add to that as well too, a question I'd like to add is, when I started getting into running and long distance running, and this is more so to the trend aspect, and this is like my own curiosity that I have from it. I knew a Ted Corbett, and then, early marathoners like Roberto Alisar and things like that. But when did you start seeing a trend of, the African runners, right? Because we see like the Kenyans, right? They've gotten involved on an elite level, and like they've dominated. And I would imagine it wasn't as early as the late 70s to the early 80s. But because I have you in this space, and I definitely want to pick your brain on that. When did you start observing that trend to start to take an uptake?
I started observing the African runners as far back as 1960.
Oh, okay.
And as I like to say, they were hungry. When you look at Blacks who excel in sports early on, it's because they were hungrier than everyone else. They saw sports as a way of bettering their community as well as bettering themselves. So there was a slow uptick in the African American runners and distance runners, but once they started saying that the runners can actually get paid, that is when you started seeing runners just coming out of nowhere going, oh, so wait a minute. So you mean all I have to do is run for a couple of hours and I can collect a check for $150,000? And, you know, the average income in my country is only $1,200. You know, it's like, yeah, they were hungry. They were hungry enough to go out and do the training and to win. So, you know, they didn't have the same obstacles that we had as Americans, and that is they didn't have a lot of cars. You know, if you had to go somewhere, you had to walk. And also you're looking at just the geographics in general. You know, they were living in high altitude locations also. So, you know, they had much better environments, so to speak, for distance running than we had.
Yeah, they definitely had an advantage in that regard, right?
Yes.
So the next thing that I want to get into as well too, and we'll go domestically with it, in terms of, you know, just Black running in general. Um, what do you tend to find? Because I think as a Black runner myself, and when I first started getting out there, right, and kind of wanting to be more involved in my community and doing stuff for my people, you realized early on, prior to you starting this organization, it was like, I'm influencing people by running, right? And I had influenced people in the Bronx that I used to see standing on the corner. And they was like, man, when you gonna go do that run again? And I say, well, listen, if you could run one lap around Crotona Park, then I'll give you some more information, right? What is, as it applies to National Black Marathoners Association, what are some tools that your organization is using to motivate Black runners?
Well, I kind of look at it from the perspective just looking at running, look at distance running in the US and how it got started and how it was able to progress. So in the 1970s is when the aerobics movement took off. And distance running was primarily a sport held by the average white man. You know, it took the average white man off the couch and got them running. So that was the first running boom, was in the 1970s. Now, these white men, you know, they would be bringing their wives and their daughters and family members to the races. And the races were actually held in their neighborhoods. So there was a lot of visibility to it. The second running boom came when white women started coming into the sport. And it was a natural kind of progression, again, because there was visibility in their neighborhoods that it was all right to go ahead and become a runner. Now, one of my undergraduate degrees is in math, and I like to say that which isn't measured isn't improved, or that which isn't tracked isn't improved. And was also on the board of directors for Running USA. So when you look at everything from the Wall Street Journal to the Washington Post, and they start quoting data about distance runners, you look at the source. The source of that usually is Running USA. Running USA had tracked a percentage of women versus men running from 1990 to about 2012. The growth of women in distance running went from 25% up to about 60%. So you're looking at 60% of the people who finished the races in this country are now female. So you say, well, how were they able to know that information? Well, it's because when you register for your race, you have to indicate your gender and your date of birth. So this information, as far as your gender, was being passively tracked because awards were given out that way. So therefore, they were able to track the progress and growth of women in distance running. So now you look at it and say, so what changes did the industry make as a result of the increase in women in distance running? Well, you have to look no further than the shirts that people wear. At one time, the only shirts that were given out were basically men's shirts, unisex shirts. Now when you register for a race and you get to pick your finisher shirt, they have men's style, and the women's style is usually a V-neck collar versus a round collar. So the industry took notice of this change and they started adapting and changing. I pointed out the third running boom are ethnic minorities. Over the years, I've seen an increase in the number of ethnic minorities participating in distance running. The white running community has not seen that growth, or if they have seen it, they don't want to acknowledge it. When I became the first Black in the world to run marathons on all 7 continents, on every single tour group I went on, I was the only Black runner. Today, you have 20, 30, if not more, Black runners all going together to run at an international location. There's a huge difference between then and now. Now you can get in a race and you can find more than 2 or 3 Black marathoners or half marathoners. I've actually stood at the finish line of some races and just kind of hand counted the number of Black runners that have crossed the finish line. So we know that there has been an increase in the growth of Black distance runners, and this is despite the fact that the races don't run through our neighborhoods, and we don't see a lot of a Black runner, so to speak, en masse, unless you come to one of our summits. So this growth is occurring despite financial input into the Black running community from the running community at large. So we are indeed growing. We're growing at a very fast rate. And what I'm looking for is for the running community to basically invest in the African American community. I like to say as an organization, the NBMA, we've been planting seeds for over 15 years in the Black community. And what we need is for the running community as a whole to provide the water. We've planted the seeds, we put the fertilizer there, and we need their financial input to actually water all these seeds. And at that point, they can see a huge growth, an exponential growth in Black distance runners.
Absolutely. So if we were to give an example, and thank you, that was a great illustration. So, we're just gonna role play real quick. I'm a white director, right? And I do want to invest in the NBDA, I'm sorry, National Black Marathoners Association. How can I help water? Give me an example of what my financial contribution is going to and how it's going to help the Black runners thrive.
Okay. We sat back and we looked at the NBMA and our programs just like a business. We realized that there were 3 components to the programs. The first one is education, the second piece is training, and the third piece is sustainability. So with education, it's about letting Black runners know that it's all right to run. That Black people do run more than sprints, we do run distances. So in high school, for example, I ran the sprints. So we can run distances. And one of the ways of moving people out of this mentality is by giving them role models. And we do that through the Black Distance Running Hall of Fame. So we put the role models out there so that when someone says, oh, well, Black people don't run distance, and I'm talking to someone who's in their 20s or 30s, I can say, well, P. Diddy ran a marathon, Kevin Hart ran one, Alicia Keys. So I could just start running off names of
Al Roker. Yeah.
People in each age group who have run marathons. And they go, well, oh, I said, yeah, it's perfectly okay to be a distance runner. The other piece of education is, like I said, we've award college scholarships to African American distance runners. For the training piece, as we were looking at Black running organizations and Black groups in different cities, we noticed that the individuals who were perhaps leading those group runs weren't trained as distance runners. Well, they themselves weren't distance runners and they didn't know anything about coaching. So there is a high rate of injuries, for example, in distance running, when you kind of have a case of the blind leading the blind. So we started encouraging our members to get their coaching certification through the Road Runners Club of America. They have a fantastic program where they train you how to go about being a distance running coach. So again, that is part of that second piece associated with training. We also developed a program in which we would train faith-based organizations and community-based organizations about how to start a running club. When we sat back and we looked within the Black community, we of course recognized that a lot of people go to church just about every Sunday. You go to church to get your spiritual soul fed and also to get motivated. So we said, well, okay, so what if we were to show churches how to go about starting a running club, a running and walking club? So we developed a one-day workshop where we show them how to go about doing that. And we covered topics from everything from insurance to how to go about motivating people. We have an interesting thing that we talk about. It's called Sex in the 60s. And the question that I throw out is that when you look at, again, the percentage of people who finish races are roughly 60% female. And by the way, that's higher when you start looking at the African-American community. When you look at individuals getting college degrees within the African-American community, between 60 to 70% of those getting degrees are female. When you start looking at people who attend church on a regular basis, 60 to 70% are female. In fact, I would challenge just about anyone to go into a Black church and just start taking a close look at the number of males versus females that are at the church, and the majority of them are women. And then we have a discussion about why do those percentages look that way? You know, what common features or characteristics are the same across all three of those: going to church, finishing a race, and getting a college degree? There's a pretty interesting discussion. My take on it is you're looking at long-term gratification. The women are more likely to delay current satisfaction for something long-term. You just don't wake up one morning and say, I think I'll run a marathon. You have to develop a base. It takes a while to train for it, and then you run the race. It's not something you just wake up in the morning and do. Same thing with going to college. You are delaying entering in the workforce today so that you can get something better in the future. In going to church, again, you're looking at your long-term salvation. So women are better, I believe, at delaying that gratification. And therefore, they tend to live longer, because African-American women live longer than African-American men. And it's about approaching distance running, selling it to men differently than you sell it to women because of long-term and short-term gratification. So that's, for example, one of the things that we talk about in this workshop, and these are things that it really has people kind of stepping back and looking and going, I never thought of it that way, and that makes sense. The third piece is sustaining the running club. And that is where in the workshop we talk about setting short-term goals, intermediate goals, and long-term goals. People will look at me and say, wait, so you've been running since 1976. That is a long time to be running, and you've logged 45,000 miles. And I say, yes, well, I have short-term goals, medium-term goals, and long-term goals. And I'm constantly working on those. And I have different systems that I use to reward myself when I've reached one of those goals. So for example, I live in Dallas. When I would run about 250 miles, which is about the distance from Dallas to Houston, there is a really nice steakhouse here in Dallas called Houston's. So I would say, hey, I'm going to go to Houston. I've run enough miles. I've run 250 miles to get there. Um, it is about 400 miles from Dallas to New Orleans. I know a nice Cajun food restaurant. You kind of get the picture.
Yeah.
So I have all these different ways of kind of keeping myself excited. Today, for example, I went out and had a really nice meal because this date in 2006 is when I ran the marathon on the Great Wall of China. So I also have all these different things to celebrate throughout the year that just kind of keep me motivated.
Absolutely. And that's a great story because I always felt that way too. Like after I finish a marathon or when I've done so in the past, I'm like, man, I'm just going to go have a nice big juicy burger. Like, I enjoyed this. Or, have like one time, literally I ate a whole entire pie. And this was like after I finished the New York City marathon in one sitting. But it's putting those little rewards, before yourself. Because again, like you said, marathons, you don't just get up in the morning. I mean, you can do it and run 26 miles and you may bang your body up. You're going to mess yourself up something really bad. However, the proper way to do it is setting those measurables, right? You start off small and you work up to it. And like you said, I loved your analogy too with college is, and whether you go from college to university with a 4 to 8 year investment, you're delaying the workforce to what? To obtain skills, right? To gain experience and things like that. So, as it relates to running, just to see, and with Black runners as well, to see the maturity and how we've evolved from the late 60s, even up until now. We notice it, right? But I think what our mission is Black people as well, is putting us just right up there with our white counterparts. And if that takes, people like Diddy or like Al Roker, Alicia Keys, and every year we see more of us out in the forefront, I think that helps the cause a bit more overall. Right? Would you agree?
Yes, and I was going to say with COVID-19, to me, that is a perfect example. When they first started talking about coronavirus and COVID-19, and they said, so, okay, this is going to hit populations that, if you happen to be obese, suffer from diabetes, have high blood pressure, hypertension, all of these things. And as I was listening to this, I said, well, why don't they just say this is going to hit Black people hard? Because those are all the things that are just kind of embedded within our community. And it really hurt me as they were saying that. And I found myself thinking, well, that's the reason why we organized the National Black Marathoners Association. So that as Blacks, we have a safe place to go. And we will be surrounded by individuals who support our mission and goal of having a healthy lifestyle. Because for a lot of us, we would go to a family reunion and we're the person kind of on the outcast everyone is kind of pointing to, say, that person runs more than 2 laps around the track, so they must be crazy. Mm-hmm. But within our organization, you can just kind of open up about, the challenges that you may be facing and get some really good advice and suggestions instead of being felt like you're an outcast. And now with COVID-19, all of a sudden, people are, I hope people are understanding now the importance of being physically fit, having a good diet, and getting those 8 hours of sleep, which are the things that we've been preaching since 2004.
Exactly. And to our listeners that are listening to this now as well, especially I'm speaking to members within the Black community. Now is the time to be conscious, right? I want to say raise the level of awareness and consciousness, just regarding your physical health, mental as well too. What I tend to do, and I've spoken to a lot of professionals in this regard, is just keeping the mind occupied. I know there's a physical aspect of it in terms of going out for a run, which is really great. But when this thing subsides, and I don't know what the new normal is going to look like, but when you come out of this, what new skills have I learned, right? Let me read a book, let something coincide with this. I look at it as downtime, but it's not downtime for everybody because many of us are still working. But I think what the goal is for us in order to thrive during this period is to, just constantly not only stay on top of our health physically, but mentally as well. Uh, right?
Yes. In fact, like I said, early on, when I first started running, I started reading a lot of books. And the thing that impressed me most, for example, about Dick Gregory, as well as, the Black character in this book who was a distance runner, was the fact that they would use their time running as a way of thinking, doing a lot of self-analysis and addressing, problems that they may have been having. I was an IT executive for almost 30 years. And at one point in my career, I remember going into meetings and people would look at me and they would think, well, no, you can't have the type of experience that we're looking for. We're looking for someone who can come in and manage multi-million-dollar international projects. And we just find it hard to believe that a Black person has ever done something like this. So I ended up returning to college in the evenings and getting a master's degree in accounting, with the understanding that I was going to sit for the CPA exam. This is even though I was a technical guru, but here I am having to actually get a CPA just to prove that I can manage a multi-million-dollar budget. At that time, there were 450,000 CPAs in the country and only 2,500 were Black. So you're looking at 0.6% of all CPAs in this country were Black. In order for me to prepare for the CPA exam, I would sit in my car, study my notes, and then go for a run. And while I'm running, I'm going through all these different accounting formulas, all the different theories, going through all of this in my head. And I ended up passing the CPA exam. When people talk about the odds of finding a marathoner is 1%, the odds of finding a Black marathoner is small. It's less than 0.1%. The odds of finding a Black CPA who also happens to be a marathoner is really, really remote. So I jokingly tell people, I says, what you know about 99% of the people always throw me in that 1% or the sub 1% category.
Absolutely.
Distance running has indeed given me a great opportunity to work on things from a mental perspective also. So I've run those 45,000 miles without listening to music.
Well, we always got to find something, right? Because those are long miles. I think even like if something is for us, something as small as like a half marathon or a 10K, you have to have something help occupy your time, right? So whether it's music or a podcast, or you're just into the visuals and you taking in the scenery, I think those are some of the best times to kind of find yourself. Because I think one of those saying, and you're familiar with it, you want to learn about yourself, run a marathon, right? Because
yes,
every thought is going through your head.
but also for me, from a safety perspective,
Mm-hmm.
it's important that you are conscious of everything going on around you.
That's right.
Yeah. Like I said, in the press release, I mentioned the fact that people have thrown beer cans, milk jugs, and everything you can imagine out of their car windows at me. Because I'm not listening to music, I'm actually hearing the speed, I'm hearing cars as they're about to approach me.
Exactly.
And, I just kind of get prepared for it.
And that's a segue into my next question, because that's you kind of naturally went there. From you have a long history from running, right? So it's a perspective that I'm very interested in and intrigued by, because you've seen, I'm pretty sure, all levels of racism. And like you just mentioned, and you said it in a press release, you had things thrown at you, you had cars honk at you. Even with the little experience I've had, right?
My house spray painted.
House spray painted, right? You've probably seen so much. So when the Ahmaud Arbery situation happened and he was murdered, a lot of us younger Black runners as well, we immediately, not only were we outraged, but we seen ourselves, and I know I seen myself as Ahmaud Arbery, because I feel like I could be running through any neighborhood in the South or any predominantly white neighborhood and fit the description, right? And I don't feel that I should have to stop for every white person with a gun. I shouldn't have to, not because I know who I am.
Yeah.
Saying that, what was your initial feelings and reaction to that happening and the impact that it had on the Black running community?
Okay. Of course, information is coming out on this more and more every day. When I first heard about it, and they were saying that he stopped at a house that was being framed, but also that he was a student at, was it South Georgia Technical College,
Yeah.
majoring in looking at being an electrical technician. As someone who has had a home built, I could see myself stopping at a home that's being framed, because as an electrical technician, in my mind, I'm thinking, I would want to see how they would frame a house, because in my mind, I would be thinking about how I would run the wires through that house. So for me, it's like I could relate to stopping and looking at something like that. Um, so then as I was finding, learning more about, his situation, I found myself asking, what could he have done differently? And what could the neighbors have done differently? And as an organization, what could we do? I asked myself, if he was running with someone else, would they have stopped him? Or would they have let him go? So as an organization, one thing that we can do is we could encourage more African Americans to run, so that maybe he could have been running with someone else. That's one of the interesting things when we get together at our summits. Some Blacks have said this is the first time they were actually around other Black distance runners. They were always doing it by themselves. So that's one thing I look at is we could, and the thing we have been doing is encouraging more African Americans to run. As an organization, we don't have running chapters, so to speak, around the country, simply because we're an all-volunteer organization, and it would take a lot to vet individuals to be coaches in each one of those cities. So we encourage our members to join the local running clubs, more specifically the local Road Runners Club of America clubs, because within those organizations, they have insurance, they have certified running coaches. And if there happen to be enough Blacks in that city and they want to form their own running club, again, with insurance and everything, then go for it. With regards to what can whites do to support the Black running community, what they can do is they could make financial contributions to our organization so we could implement the programs that we've identified and we have already tried, and we have seen that those programs work. So our only, the only constraint that we have is based off of the money that comes into the organization. That's the only constraint. So because when we, you can't exactly go out and educate people about, you shouldn't go and point a gun at someone. But what we can do is we can impact and influence members of the Black community.
I like, and I have brought that up in a previous discussion about, just kind of throwing the idea, because when I looked at the video, right, and like you said, information is constantly being produced in the media and things like that. But I think what was jarring to me was he was alone, and like yourself, that's what stuck out to me, because I wondered that as well. I said, well, what would have happened if he had 2 or 3 other Black runners with him, right? Like, would he have been pursued for that amount of time? Would they been a little bit more reserved? And because it's a group of Black runners, whereas it was only one, we don't know those things. But like you said, and as it applies to your organization, I think there needs to be a level of awareness across the board. Funding is always appreciated. But yeah, definitely, and people like yourself, and we'll be in contact But I do want to start speaking to race directors in general, black and whites, and just to kind of see how we can improve not only the awareness, but just relations in terms of where our black runners are and what communities they're running through. And again, these answers aren't a end all or be all, but hopefully we could just come up with something, because as you know, and you've been on this earth a lot longer than me, it is very difficult to operate in this world as a black man. And I just feel personally, we operate, or we move in a defense mode, right? Like we don't want to raise our tone because it comes off as the angry black man or angry black woman, right? Don't Samuel L. Jackson me, or should I put my hoodie on? I don't care either way, but I'm cold. That's why I'm putting my hoodie on. So perception is just, there's such a negative perception, and I think that's the only time I'm bothered as a black person, because a lot of times, like, it's the wrong perception.
Okay, so and I actually come at this from an interesting perspective from law enforcement. Back in the 1970s, I was working at an organization in St. Louis, which was responsible for providing technical support to the local law enforcement agencies, the justice departments, which are the courts, the city police, the county sheriff, and all these different police departments. And one of the things I was tasked with was writing a program which determined the probability of there being a warrant on someone and whether or not that person was to be considered extremely dangerous. So this is the beginning of there being basically laptops or computers in police cars. Our police officers being able to radio in, kind of describing a person. When I wrote this program, I tested it out using information about, my coworkers and everyone, and everything seemed to be working fine. And I put in my physical description and characteristics, and it popped up that there was a high probability that there were warrants on me and that I was to be considered extremely dangerous. Now, I'm the author of the program.
Right? Ain't that's something?
So I took and I rewrote it.
Yeah.
Ran it again, and it came back with the same results. So this takes into account your physical description, your name, a whole bunch of other things. And I had access to all the different police files, the NCIC files, FBI, you name it, I had access to it. And this is what it was going against. And so I reached out to our subject matter expert, who was a police officer, and I also pulled the file. And I found out there was a guy there born in Missouri. We were within like the variance of 1 to 2 years of age, 1 to 2 inches of height, within 5 to 10 pounds of each other. And this guy was like my double. We almost even had the same name. As I was talking to the police officer and said, so what should I do if I ever get pulled over by a police officer? And he said that it is up to the police officer's judgment as to what they're going to do. So he said, they are going to be looking at what you do more so than what you say. So it's important for you to be calm, to be courteous, because when they run your driver's license, they're going to have to decide, is this the person that there's a warrant on?
That's a good perspective. And I think I've had this discussion before in the past as well too, is how you interact with with an officer. And I've heard this before too, is kind of determines whether you make it home or not. Right. And
Right.
I think a lot of times, even there are times when we are calm and it still happens. The gentleman in Minnesota, he's, I'm really angry at myself for forgetting his name, but he said, hey, I had a firearm. I do have a firearm, a licensed firearm in the car. And it didn't calm the nervousness of that officer. And unfortunately, he was shot in front of his wife. But for the most part, I do find, and what we tend to do, and I think us as Black people, we've gotten better in terms of how we deal with the police. But and this is just my own personal opinion, I think because they're not part of our community and they're not and they don't know who we are personally, we're always at a disadvantage because we have to prove that we're not a threat. right? There's just I've just seen it too many times where it's just like, again, I'm a college educated, tax paying citizen, no criminal record, but like you said, what could be in a what could be manufactured in a database, you know, I could be deemed as a threat, and we're just always having to prove we're not a threat, and that's the only thing that I hope, as the years go on, we can kind of divert from that, and just be looked at as, no, we're just part of society and we contribute greatly to society, right, in all aspects. The last thing, as we get to the tail end of this, and I really want to get into the, you know, the things that the NBMA is doing. You spoke of the scholarships that you guys are providing. You have, like you said, every 2 years, you have a Hall of Fame, which is great. Let's start with that. Where is that, and how does a candidate qualify for the Hall of Fame?
Okay. So we have the Hall of Fame every 2 years, and it will be next year at the Flying Pig Marathon in Cincinnati. A person doesn't necessarily qualify for the Hall of Fame. We have our historian, Gary Corbett. He'll provide us with a list of individuals that, you know, that he feels should be inducted into the Hall of Fame. Some of these individuals are Olympians. They may be national champions. We also look at individuals who are who have done some truly amazing things as distance runners, and they may not have been at the national level. So we, you know, get all these names together. We look at them, and then the board of directors will vote on who should be inducted into the Hall of Fame. One of the most, to me, one of the fun things for me is getting on the phone and calling these individuals, because for the most part, they had never heard of the National Black Distance Running Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
But when they look to see who is in the Hall of Fame, they get totally blown away. They're like going, oh my goodness, you know, I didn't hear about you guys. Two of the most interesting people that we inducted that I got an opportunity to talk to, one of them was Dick Gregory. And I had an opportunity to interview him, and the interview was recorded. And when we first sat down, the first thing he did was he tapped my leg and he goes, I've heard of you. I've heard of your organization and the great things you've done. And I was just totally blown away. I was only supposed to interview him for about 4 or 5 minutes. And 20 minutes into the interview, this young lady interrupted us, and she says, Mr. Gregory, you know, you're running behind schedule. We, you know, had you for doing all these other things. And Dick Gregory looked at the young lady and he said, listen, I'm the star. I do what I want to do. I want to talk to this young man about my days as a distance runner. And when he said that, it dawned on me all the things that he has done. No one probably ever interviewed him about his days as a distance runner. And so we had this beautiful video of him just talking about distance running. The other person that was a real shock and surprise was his brother. His brother, Ron Gregory, was his younger brother, and he was faster than Dick Gregory. But the interesting thing about him was he held the national high school record for the 1 mile. And as he and I were talking, he said, hey, you know, tell me about yourself. So I told him, you know, he says, yeah, you know, I know you're from St. Louis. So as I was telling him about myself, he goes, I know exactly where those elementary schools are. He said, I used to teach at Soldan High School. And I said, really? I said, do you remember the principal's secretary? He goes, yeah, that was Jeanette. I go, that was my mother. And it turns out I met him back in the 60s. Mm-hmm. And we were both just kind of blown away. As I was talking about the teachers who were there, because I used to go to the school every day after middle school to wait for my mother to finish working. So I ended up knowing a lot of the teachers. At the Hall of Fame induction, we gave him his award, and then we said, we have something very special for you. And it was it was just like, it was only like about that tall. It was about 6 inches tall, and it was the number one. And it represented him setting a national record in the 1 mile. And he held the record for all of 6 hours before it was broken. And after he gave his Hall of Fame induction speech, he sat down, and then he literally came back up to the podium and he said, you know, you all are the first group who has ever recognized me for holding this record for the 1 mile. He was
Just
just blown
cool.
away, you know.
Yeah. And I love that too, because like you said, and I've seen Dick Gregory in so many different interviews, and it's profound, right? Like you said, you to for you to speak about something that he was passionate about. I don't know where he was in his life in terms of running at that point when you interviewed him, but you know, for him to stop, you know, I don't know if that was his PR person, right? Or but this is important conversation, and where I'm going to speak, like you said, I'm the star. And this is the agenda. I love that. That's actually an amazing story. The second thing that I have for you is the scholarships. Okay. Now, just run down to me, how do the scholarships work for people that want to donate? First off, is it nationwide, or do they go to a specific group of schools? How is one eligible, and how can people donate?
We have information about that on our website. We have awarded scholarships to students all around the country,
Okay.
and all they have to do is go online, fill out the application, and send it in. We accept, of course, donations from everyone. The more people donate, literally, the more we could turn around and give to the college students. I've been, again, the executive director ever since 2004. I've never drawn a salary. No one has ever drawn a salary. So this money isn't going into our pockets. This is going to the scholarships. When we first started off, we only awarded a scholarship for the first year of college. And finally, I started challenging our members to say there's no reason why we can't award scholarships for all 4 years. The NBMA is just like any other nonprofit. In fact, I kind of compare it to the HBCUs as well as to our religious organizations. You can have a lot of people, attending, but you need those same people to turn around and donate to the organization. I look at it and say, we have 16,000 people in our Facebook group. What types of things could we do if each one of those individuals donated even $1? It would be amazing. If each person donated $10, that would be even better. So we are just limited based off of the donations that we receive from people. Right now, one of the things we're doing is for Global Running Day, when people make what we call a marathon donation of $26.21, they would receive a Global Running Day medal. And the proceeds from that, again, goes into our scholarship fund. And our website is www.blackmarathoners.org. So they can go there, make a donation to help the college students. So a couple of years ago, our first student who received a scholarship for all 4 years spoke at our 15-year anniversary summit to thank people. And it was a really, really moving and motivating speech that she gave. That people can, again, go out to our website, click on the link for scholarships, and they could, watch her 3-minute video of thanking us for giving her the 4-year scholarship. And she is the reason that we also went to 4 years, because for the years up to that, we would, give the, award the scholarship. She was the first person who wrote us a letter thanking her, thanking us for giving her the scholarship. And that's the other thing that drove me to go to the board members to say, this is the person who came back and thanked us. Let's see what we could do as an organization to help her for the next 3 years.
Exactly. And you definitely want to keep something like that going, and especially when you see the impact that it has on the next generation of Black runners that are coming up. Again, you guys could go to the website as well to check this out. And if you'd like to donate, the information's on the website. I did see the video and the press release. So you not only there's visual evidence and proof that this money is going to good use. I know you have the initiative for Global Running Day that's coming up in 2020. With COVID-19 and everything going on, I know a lot of stuff's been canceled, but what do you guys have as an organization going on for the rest of the year that the public should know about and going into 2021?
Yes, our 2020 summit is at the St. Jude Memphis Marathon. That is the first weekend in December. What makes this summit unusual is we are going to be raising money for the St. Jude Hospital. One of the things that we found out that's kind of interesting about St. Jude is they actually have a research facility looking at sickle cell anemia. And they, in fact, found a cure for sickle cell. So a lot of people didn't realize that about the St. Jude Hospital and Research Center, is that they actually work with sickle cell. So again, we're going to be raising money to help St. Jude. We'll also be honoring one of our Hall of Fame inductees, Angela Ivory. She was born and raised in Memphis. She was the first African-American woman to finish marathons in all 50 states. She may have been the first African-American woman to also run 100 and 200 marathons.
Wow.
So she passed away several years ago. Her parents still live in Memphis. And we will also be dedicating the Hall of Fame medal to her. So there's going to be a medal with her image on it that we will also be giving to our members who raise, I believe it's at least $250 for St. Jude.
Awesome. So if you guys, to any of my listeners that's listening to this as well, and they would like to contribute or donate, we do have the one event coming up and the Global Running Day where you can donate the $26. If you can donate more than that, that would be great as well. Then you also have the St. Jude's information. Again, if you have missed that, is at blackmarathoners.org. Again, we'll have that information for you guys going up. If anyone else wants to reach out, what are the other means outside of the website?
Okay, well, the good thing is it is free to join the NBMA. So there is no annual membership fee or dues. What we would like, again, for people to do is just to go ahead and make a donation. We don't want to use a membership fee as a reason to exclude people. We have a very active Facebook group where you can go and ask for advice from coaches. In fact, you could even be very specific in your question and say you want a certified running coach to respond to your question. So we have a lot of experienced runners who are there who will gladly, again, share with you their advice. And again, the Facebook group is National Black Marathoners Association.
Exactly. And again, I'm part of that group. To my listeners that's listening to this, especially the listeners of color. Again, it's volunteer. Like he said, it doesn't cost anything to be part of the Facebook group, and a lot of running groups that are accepting membership fees. Again, you can get a lot of this resources just by asking a question. And even if whether it's marathon training or what you like to do. So when these things are coming up and they have these initiatives in terms of they need donations to not only honor our fellow Black runners, but to honor and help our next generation of Black runners get through college and university, it's essential. So yeah, it was really, thank you so much, Tony, for allowing me to speak to you. What you have and what you've been running since 2004 is an amazing space. It is definitely influential. And as we see the uptick of, Black runners, we do need organizations like this. A lot of times, and people's told me this, and I tell people like yourself this as well, we tend to do things just because we want to do them from our heart, but we don't see the impact that it has on people. You didn't see it until the young lady wrote that letter, right? And
Yes.
it's very important that we keep pushing and we keep doing these things. So I want to thank you so much. If you have anything to add before we get out of here, you have the floor.
Oh, well, thank you very, very much for having me on the program, and look forward to seeing you possibly at St. Jude.
Yeah. Hopefully, let's see if I could get out of Canada. They lift the restrictions, but yeah, definitely. Once things, if we get back to a space of normality, and I don't know what normal will be anymore, but definitely, I want to move this forward. And even if I can ever help you, Tony, in terms of using my platform to assist you in your goals, I'm always here for that. So
Okay.
again, we have that space, and if you want to join the Facebook group, you can join the Facebook group as well, National Black Marathoners Association. And also you can check out the website, feel free at blackmarathoners.org. I'm Jay Denson. This is another episode. I want to thank you guys for tuning in. We are Fit Health Well everywhere. We are fithealthwell.com. Also, we are on Instagram, fit.health.well. We are also on Twitter, Fit Health Well. And then also, if you'd like to shoot us an email, be a show guest, or if you just have general questions about any of our guests or anything just related to health and wellness, you can send an email to fithealthwell@gmail.com. Again, I thank you guys for listening and tuning in every week. I'm very grateful for that. And until the next episode, have a great day.